My name's David Shookman. I'm Environment and Science Correspondent for BBC News. And my job this morning is to moderate our discussion, to make sure everybody who wants to gets a say, can add comments and ask questions, and hopefully we'll get a debate going. The theme of this session, as you know, is supporting and financing low-carbon growth and development. To my journalist's mind, I always try to think of images that go with that theme. And I'm reminded of, on my way to the Bali climate conference in December 2007, I went to Borneo first to do some filming about the rainforest. And my journey took me to Kota Kinabalu on Borneo in the province of Sabah. And on the drive from the airport to my hotel, I passed all these new apartment blocks and new hotels that are going up on the waterfront in Kota Kinabalu. I don't know if anybody knows the boom town there. And I looked up out of the taxi window to see that outside every single window of every single apartment or hotel room was an air conditioning unit, a separate air conditioning unit, each of which would be powered presumably by a coal-fired power station tucked away around the corner. And I thought to myself, what a pity that that's the path this resort, this booming resort, is on. And then, of course, I got to my hotel and got to my room and was incredibly relieved to find that there was an air conditioning unit functioning. And I realized that how selfish one can be about this. And I guess at the heart of this whole debate is the developed world saying, oops, we realize we may have made a few wrong turns in our development, and that you guys in the developing world ought to do it differently. And on the agenda right now is whether or not there's a check from the developed world to help pay for the developing world to get onto a pathway that would be different to the pathway that we've been on to get ourselves to where we are today. So at heart, I think that's kind of what the issue is for debate. So very distinguished panel this morning, working along the line, but in no particular order. Jules Kortenhorst, who is CEO of the European Climate Foundation. Very, very pleased to say we have with us at short notice Loren Legarda, Senator from the Philippines, who I'm very glad to say is a former journalist, so I feel a bit connected already. Next on the line we have Eddie Yentsu, who is Chairman of the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research in Ghana, and on the end there, Salim ul Haq, Senior Fellow of Climate Change for International Institute for Environment and Development. Should we just go along? Jules, do you want to kick off just with your thoughts? I think if each panelist says a few words, no great time limit on that, but a few minutes just to make a few remarks about this conundrum of the low-carbon challenge for growth and development, and we'll see where we go, but very much the aim to keep this informal and encourage debate. So I'm going to hand the baton to you, Jules.
Thank you, David. Good morning. It seems indeed a big conundrum. On the one hand, there are still billions of people that live on less than $2 a day and that have every right to, for which we feel the moral imperative to help them develop. And on the other hand, it is also abundantly clear that we need to reduce emissions dramatically from the current levels. And if you divide those two, if you make the calculation, what we essentially need to do over the course of the next 40 years is to improve the carbon productivity of our global economy by a factor of 10. That sounds daunting. But interestingly enough, if you put it in historical perspective, it may not be impossible. The Industrial Revolution over the course of about 120 years resulted in an improvement of labor productivity in the United States of about a factor of 10. So the only challenge is that we have to do this slightly faster, and we have to focus our attention on carbon productivity instead of labor productivity. Now, if you set about such an ambitious project to drive down the intensity of our greenhouse gas emissions with a factor of 5 and at the same time grow our global economy by a factor of 3 in order to help people come out of poverty, then you better create a plan. And it's the idea of low carbon growth plans that my foundation and our network of foundations, Climate Works, have been promoting as a possible mechanism to help countries think through what is needed in order to make that transition to improve that carbon productivity. The idea here then is that each country around the world, over the course of the next years, creates a plan. A low carbon growth plan, a plan for economic development that at the same time reduces emissions. In this plan, we need to take clear consideration of the abatement, the mitigation opportunities. But the plans should not just be about mitigation. They should also take into consideration the specific needs of each country with regard to adaptation. And those are very different for a country in the middle of Africa from a country like Bangladesh, from a small island state. We also need to take into consideration in these plans what are the technology needs in order to help these countries make those low carbon growth transitions. And we need to think about the financing needs. And it is our view that if each country makes one of these plans in their own mechanism, appropriate to its own circumstances, driven by the opportunities for mitigation, the needs for adaptation, and the requirements for funding and technology, then those plans could in some way become the platform for discussion among countries about what is needed. And they also could become a mechanism to mobilize both the business community and civil society in the path towards low carbon growth. And finally, they become a mechanism for all of us to look at each other and say, are we on the right track? To measure and to report if we are on the right track. So the concept of low carbon growth plans may be a way in which countries, developing and developed, can make the transition to low carbon prosperity. And we believe that this concept, this idea, could be a component of the solution in Copenhagen. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, do you want to pass the mic straight on? Or do you want to say a few words from your perspective?
Thank you, David, and thank you for allowing me to join this esteemed group. I did my piece yesterday at the opening plenary, and I thought my job was done. My mistake was going to the dinner cruise and sharing a table with the Minister of Luxembourg, who suddenly had to return home and requested me along with Mr. Walter First to pinch hit for him. So I'm a pinch hitter, and I'll try my best with all these experts and the scientists. Anyway, I believe that the global financial crisis exported by Wall Street, by the United States to Europe, Asia, and the whole world, brought about by human greed of individuals, corporations, institutions, could be likened to the climate crisis, which is brought about by human greed, by industrialization, by unsustainable development. Doing low carbon growth and shifting from rapid industrialization to low carbon growth and sustainable development is the only option that we must do. We are doing it in the Philippines in our own way, coming from an archipelago of 92 million Filipinos. We have enacted laws to try to slow down our growth in a more sustainable, adaptable, equitable manner by enacting two laws. First is the Biofuels Act, and second is the Renewable Energy Act. I think it is about time that all nations, big or small, polluter or minimal polluter, LDC or developed nation, must not only enact laws, but do proactive legislation, policies, and programs by their national governments, as well as collaborate with each other in respective regions and internationally in various fora